Another Founder Wisdom Pod. We have Vlad Baranov with us today. Vlad is a tech/startup business coach. He operates in the deep tech, space tech, and science. He's a YC and TS mentor to CTOs and COOs. I guess this pod is presented to you by podfire.com. If you want to start a podcast, scale it, monetize it, go to podfire.com. Vlad, welcome to the pod. Tell me a bit more about yourself and what you're up to nowadays.
Thank you, Charles. Glad to be here. Well, listen, and it's a new year. Everybody is coming up with new ideas, especially in the world of tech. And one of the biggest problems people face is, how do I get started? How do I take this idea, take it to the market, go shop it around? How do I build it up? How do I convert it into tech? I have this technology. How do I take it to the market? Or, hey, I get no tech. I just get an idea. How do I take it next level? And this is a kind of conversations I'm excited to be having in this year, helping engineers and scientists get their ventures off the ground.
And tell me about your background. You've done a couple of startups yourself. I guess you started in the banking sector, National Bank of Canada, Citi, Deutsche Bank. So tell me about your background, and how that makes you a good business coach for startup founders.
Yeah, that's a good question. I started out as a computer science and computer engineer in universities, and I was building robotics for about 4 years. Just because in the area of New York City, the most companies they hire is finance. You know, being young and 21, you make the smartest decisions. So I went into finance because that's where the money was. Spent about 8 years building trading systems. I learned a lot about finance, more that I probably need to. But I realized at some point that large company is probably not a good match for me. Spun out of that and started first startup in peer-to-peer lending that didn't take off, and then switched over to another one where we did a wealth management startup. We grew it from 2 people to 150, eventually selling it to a larger financial institution. So we picked up all the experience of running startups, buying startups, raising money. So it was a great experience. Then I realized that I'm probably more aligned with other areas of engineering, and decided to try out aerospace. Switched over into aerospace industry, helped start another startup there. We grew to about maybe 30 people, got about $10 million in government contracts, and launched a couple satellites. So that was very exciting. But then along the journey, I realized the impacts that I was making and I wanted to make on this planet was sort of narrowing down, and I decided to step away from aerospace and to see how I can broaden my impact as much as possible by leveraging my experience, leveraging my knowledge to help others operate their startups across various disciplines of technology and science.
And regarding directly to that last point, do you feel that aerospace is impactful, or should we focus on improving this planet Earth before we focus our time on getting elsewhere in the universe?
That's a good question. Very, very timely question, given all the words were spoken today at the inauguration. I think the answer is both. I think it's like you cannot progress without taking care of your body, and you cannot just take care of your body forever without growing. So I think we need to invest resources equally both ways. And just from statistical perspective, there's probably an asteroid out there which is heading for us. Regardless of what we're doing here on the planet, having a second planet provides a really good backup. Now, I'm also not saying that we should be destroying our planet, because who knows when we're going to find that planet too. We should be taking care of it and making sure that's sustainable. Now, to answer your question about aerospace, it absolutely can make impact in aerospace. I just realized it's really hard to make that impact as an individual. Aerospace market, especially space market, the part of the space outer orbits, not the airplanes, has about 90% of government participation. So most of the companies which are there are participating in a lot of government projects, which narrow your impact that you can do as an individual, even if you're running a company, because you're still assigned to specific government programs that you have to accomplish. Now, there are very unique paths of like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk who can make a lot of impact, but you don't see a lot of those people around who can really proliferate. And thus, if I step outside and help a couple of space companies, couple aerospace companies, couple biotechnology companies, couple life sciences companies, couple would be chip manufacturing companies, I feel that all the knowledge is necessary there, and it can scale and make a much bigger impact.
Right. And some technologies that some discoveries that we made from the space domain, we can bring back to this Earth, right? We've seen that
Of
countless
course,
times.
of course.
And the startups that you've helped, because yeah, it seems that you've been an advisor for quite some time, which have been the most impressive and why?
Ooh, I think impressions are measured differently. Some people measure it in dollars, some people measure it in clients. I measure them in mindset changes. So if a client walks away from a session saying like, "I've never thought about this way before," or "This is really deep, give me 5 minutes to think about it," I believe that's how I measure my progress. If I change somebody's perspective on how they were doing things so they can become more aligned and more fulfilled in what they're doing, especially in areas that I support, like science and technology, I feel that's where my most progress is derived from.
Right. And as a technical slash engineering minded person, how do you see the world? Because you also seem like human oriented, but do you see this in terms of impact, in terms of webs, in terms of probabilities? How do you see the world and the business world more specifically?
Can you rephrase that a little bit? Like, what do you mean by seeing the business world?
How do you see the world? I see the world quite differently from most people.
Mhm.
Business, but also personal. I see it in terms of systems and statistics and probabilities. Well, most people see it from a direct serotonin standpoint of getting pleasure from things. Granted, your background, with what lens do you see the world? What is your worldview, sort of?
I see. Um, I think my lens is to understand a lot of other people's lenses at the same time, and let me kind of draw that trajectory out. That we have mixes of different trends, different philosophies, different policies, kind of engaging in this sometimes victim, sometimes victimless battle of which one can proliferate over certain outcomes they want to achieve. And different societies have different things. Like, for example, capitalist society strives for the most kind of winner take all mentality. And if you don't have like accountability or regulation, then that whole system kind of spins out of control. I wouldn't say I believe that the world is set up with perfect systems. I would say it's more like there are amorphous, gray kind of territory systems that interact with each other in ways that are not always predictable, although there is a statistical probability of certain engagements that happen between the systems. And I think also systems is, I feel like it's like, I know you asked me for my lens, but that's obviously personal, not objective. System is a narrative, right? That we tell ourselves that that's how the world works. And generally, I don't think world cares about anything on its own. I don't think atoms care about any of our feelings. So they care about only the ways that they've interacted before. It maybe will interact in the future. Out of that arises some sort of order, which we kind of try to operate and control through the means of statistics. But at the same time, that's our kind of like thinking brain, processing brain, logical brain. We also at the same time experience world, at least I experience world through my emotions, right? And if I let my emotions go first or let my logic go first, it will depend on experience or outcomes I want to achieve. So I would say both, I balance those views in a sense where I have to switch on just saying, hey, I think I should be just following my emotional part here, or switch over, hey, this is logical, this is system. I realized if I just follow the world in systematic ways and just look at everything in system, it removes all the taste, the flavor, the color of the experiences that I'm having. And if I'm fully submerged in the experiences, emotional ones, I just feel it enjoying life a lot more.
Mhm. Yeah, the world and atoms, I think there's some constants though, like it's constantly in movement. I think it is predictable in some sense. Do you think that way too?
Um, I think a lot of things are predictable, but there also are predictable only in large numbers and not through individuals. So if you take a specific individual, there's only so much prediction you can do because all individual actions are binary. If you look at a group of people, yes, we start falling under statistical bell curve of how we behave. But individual, I wouldn't say it's always easy to predict.
And how do you think best founders think usually? Is it from an impact perspective? Is it from a utilitarian perspective? What kind of lens do they have, most of them?
I see. I think everybody has different, because in the end, people start their companies to achieve some sort of outcome, be that to kind of grow beyond the impact that they're currently making with their job, maybe achieve some monetary success, maybe reach a new level intellectual capacity, maybe reach some sort of fame. But in the end, it's still a time or time limited goal or effort limited goal. In sense, like once that goal is achieved, something else needs to be happening beyond that. So in the sense that you're not pursuing one large thing at a time, you have to split it up into milestones. You have to split it up in kind of quantifiable goals, because it's hard to pursue anything that is amorphous.
Do you feel that you are maximizing your impact by coaching and not starting a next startup yourself?
Statistically speaking, yes. So let's say if I'm working with, let's say 50 executives in different science and technology startups, and I help them find their niche, or I help them find and multiply their own impact, then I feel like I've been an agent of that impact. When I'm starting my own startup, is kind of going back to when you're acting as your own agent, or you're acting as a statistical bell curve for, let's say, 50 people. There is a high chance that my startup is not going to succeed, despite my efforts, despite my energy, despite my money. But if I kind of do a portfolio of my effort across multiple executives, then there is a higher chance for some of those efforts to solidify.
And do you feel that the world needs more moonshotters? And do you feel that current environment rewards these upcoming or yet to be moonshotters?
Um, I think environment. I'm not sure if I know the answer to that question, but I think the environment generally rewards those who provides for its needs. So if the market has needs, and the person who is going for those needs satisfies them, they get financially and emotionally rewarded. If you're talking about moonshotters in a way that Charlie Munger was talking about it, there's a narrative in my head which I feel a little bit supported. That, let's say, if you have 100 alpha people beating their chest, saying like, "Oh my God, I'm just gonna do it. I'm just gonna go for it. I'm gonna jump off the cliff. Yay, me, super fantastic. I'm gonna go for the moon." If 90% of them fail, so 90 out of 100, and 10 of them succeed, they're still gonna be the same people, still gonna be like telling everybody to like just beat their chest and jump off the cliff and like just go for it 100%, without telling them about the 90 people who done exactly the same thing and failed, because there's so much pride and there is so much ego with those personalities that they will never actually share that they ever failed. And there's a false false narrative that gets created that if you do that, then you're successful. I think I don't want to say, I guess success, reaching your goals or reaching your aspiration is a lot more communal oriented effort than something that you're doing on your own, just beating your chest and screaming from the top of your lungs.
And don't you feel that most Silicon Valley founders, let's say 90% of them are chest stumping, but also open sourced? Isn't that the movement in the community we're seeing nowadays?
So here's the dilemma, right? The only people you hear from are the chest stumping ones. So it's like our media is filled with those ones, but the ones which are not doing that is not filled, but they're doing impact in other ways.
Yeah, because for example, Sam Altman, I wouldn't call him chest stumping, but definitely lots of testosterone to accomplish what he did, right? But he's also about giving back. Elon, to some degree, has gone south as of late, but
Yes.
Zuckerberg could be a good example. They compete, right? So they cooperate and they compete. It seems that most of Silicon Valley is on that same line. I think when the lines become blurred is when there's old schmucks as investors, right, sitting on the board and be like, "Hey, don't share that. Don't tell. Keep your mouth closed," right? Like we don't want to attract bad PR. But I think that's a minority nowadays.
I think what also happens is that once you reach a beyond a certain level of notoriety, it's no longer becomes a market problem or a technical problem. It becomes more a political problem or situation, and that's where things become very messy. And I see a lot of Silicon Valley people trying to translate politics into more of a technical or some problem that you can box, and it's very hard because naturally politics is more of an art of following with the trend, and I think technologists by default do not follow the trends. They try to do the thing on their own, which they think is right. And again, this is like where the conversation with the market happens. And I think this is where Elon Musk is losing a lot of followers, where he's doing with the things that he thinks is right, but not necessarily, let's say, consulting, or let's say being communal from perspective of where perhaps he can win over hearts and minds of others. I think Sam probably tries to do that more. I think Zuckerberg became a lot more politically savvy recently and a lot more aware of the trends. Sam is, I'm not sure. Like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know neither of those people personally very well. Elon just been on radar for much longer. But Zuckerberg definitely has become more politically savvy. And Sam, I think, is still figuring out how to do that right, because a lot of things with the board and a lot of executives departing is not really looking good for him. I know from my little chair here, but yeah.
And again, to my point of boards, I think that's what's hampering Sam. I think he's a great guy, even without knowing him personally. I can see from his content in his post and talking about the open source movement, right? Like constantly
Yes.
being there on Twitter and constantly being behind the camera, conveying messages, right? And being transparent about the company. I think that's good. But yeah, if you bring in big Microsoft with a bunch of old schmucks on the board, not good. That was the death of ChatGPT, sort of, and OpenAI as a company, in my opinion. Not a huge boost like most people would think. And yeah, it's surprising. Elon, the question is like, why does he bring his scientific mindset to politics? Or maybe he is, right? Maybe it's like his whole agenda is working right now, and he's really successful at manipulating people, which I guess is the science behind politics, right? It's a major PR bullshit game, and maybe he's playing it really good. But his past supporters and serial entrepreneurs and founders are seeing right through the bullshit, right? So it's sort of losing us and probably losing parts of him and the whole mix. Because I do think that political science can be a science, a real science, right, with numbers and. But again, if you think in terms of democracy, it's like, okay, how can I please or have these people think that this is what they need? It's like the dilemma of what they want vs what they need. It's a very complex game, and one that I probably don't want to play. It doesn't fit my values. I feel we should reshape the full system. Now, Silicon Valley nowadays is very much about AI. Is that like how the world should be? Like VCs are mostly investing in AI companies. At first, you were like, okay, founders they have a specific problem to solve, but I mean, what if they solve an ice cream problem that is making, or a Coca-Cola problem that is making the world fatter and less better? Shouldn't people start with AI in mind, or should they start with a specific problem in mind?
I know you tried to move away from the politics, but I think you jumped back right into the politics by saying which problem to solve, which problem to solve, to choose to solve.
Right.
And I think that we're going back to like ethics of investment. Like, will you support new defense innovations, given the rise of new access powers? Will you support new drug development? Right? Will you support new product manufacturing? Let's say new Coca-Cola. If you're going from pure VC standpoint, the money you are fiduciary to your limited partners, and you need to pursue, depending on the contract, of course. But let's say if we take a generic VC, they're interested with 10x, 20x, 100x outcomes, and usually it doesn't matter for what industries they invest in. But more sophisticated VCs, which have a lot of kind of like political savvy, political information, ethical information, will craft their contract in a way with LPs that they will pursuing only certain type of investments. Yes, AI is everywhere. AI is going to be everywhere, and there's going to be a lot of outcomes from investment into AI. I personally believe there should be a lot of ethical considerations, which projects we pursue. But again, this world is filled with many different people who sometimes take ethics in considerations and many that don't.
Yeah, where I was sort of getting at, because it was all over the place, the question is like, does AI solve every problem?
That's a good question. I'm not familiar with every problem, so I don't know. I think right now it doesn't solve loneliness or a hug problem. Like AI cannot give me a hug. It can do massage, but it probably not in the same way I'd be feeling about if a robot gives me a hug of some sort.
Right. Well, a hug is like a bot being warmed and wrapping your body around yours.
Sure.
So,
So that's the physical experience, but will they come additionally with a mental one? Like, what will I have to do to convince myself that I should be experiencing the same empathy
oh, that's
for?
easy. We convince ourselves of stuff all the time. That's the easiest thing.
Well, I don't think I'm sure we can get to there. Like, do I believe that my brain can be influenced through EEG or some sort of other extracranial influence? Yes, of course. I just don't know how we can do that now.
A good example is porn, right? We convince ourselves that we are really having sexual intercourses with something, and it's her hand.
Well,
And
well,
70% of the world does it.
this conversation is definitely leading going away from the professional topics. So I'll just probably say no comment on that.
What is professional? Is my
Uh,
next question.
that's a good question. I'd say, as probably one of the judges said when they were looking at the topic you mentioned, it's like, I will let you know when I see it.
Yeah, I don't believe there should be like a professional vs non-professional barrier. I think we should be like authentic and who we are.
Yes.
And yeah, I think that's why some founders like Alman are sort of losing feathers, right? Like they have a board and they can't say things, they can't say other things. And I think that's where society starts to go one way. Do you feel that robotics the next step in the AI world? Is that what we need next to achieve AGI?
I wouldn't say it's a step to AGI. Like AGI itself, like can be just interfaced through the console. You can still ask the questions without any physical manipulators. But I do think implementing a world that is experiences less hunger and experiences more joy is done through physical manipulation of the matter. And if AI and robots are able to be programmed to help us with agriculture, we need manufacturing needs, or going outer space, which they already are, it would be a much better world to live in. I also do think that you mentioned some of the topics are really hard to discuss. It's like the choices. Do you prefer working with, let's say, women or men? And if you have a truly one opinion, and let's say you're running the company, some of the topics probably should not be discussed, because if you really truly say your real opinion, then you probably lose 50% of your employees. And even though it might be up for discussion, but as a leader of organization or a country, it only needs half of your electorate. So I don't know why would anybody just talk openly about everything they're thinking.
Yeah, sort of agree with a version of that. Yeah, the world is gray, right? Like not black or white. But in my case, I wouldn't hire employees. One, I would use AI agents. And
Mm,
second, I wouldn't take investors. And third, I would choose my clients really carefully, and I would work with people similar to myself, mindset wise. And the outcome of that is full liberty, right? One can say whatever they want, whenever, to whomever, right? And think like people need to narrow down on who they are as beings and who they
yes,
want to work with. I
yes,
think that's why politics are so messy, is that it's like the full population that you didn't choose to have as clients, right? We can view it as a business. I pretty much think it's the same, right? There's outcomes, but when the outcomes become like, yeah, what do you say? What lies do you say? I think it's so easy to lose yourself in lies. And that's a bad thing with PR. Like, if you're very intelligent, you'll start telling lies to yourself. You'll start believing in these lies, right? Like
yes,
we talked about previously. And you will just go in a direction which is totally opposite to what you are about. And then you'll have a midlife crisis in your 50s. And you're like, how did I become that way, right? Well, you
right,
lost track of who you are.
right.
Any
But
exercise for founders or CEOs to learn more about themselves and who they are?
So I will answer that question, but I think maybe the dynamic which you mentioned as far as selecting your clients and being open-minded, I think that is true up to a certain level where you're not dependent on others. And if you're dependent on other people's systems, like let's say banks or lenders or house providers, or to some degree government, you have maintained, even though you want to say what you want to say, you still are interested in maintaining a good relationship with them. So in a sense, if you're saying
Right.
something that is offensive to them, you're taking the risk of upsetting a relationship which keeps you afloat. Now, it's much fewer those relationships you have as an independent citizen or a business person. I don't know, up to maybe 100, 1,000, 10,000 clients that you have. You don't have a choice when you have 100,000 people reporting to you, because all of a sudden you have a population which is a lot more diverse and which you haven't chosen, and you do have to run the organization as more of a politician than a business person, because you're no longer allowed the freedoms or liberties as you would as, let's say, individual person. But I don't think um, running your liberties the way you want is scalable to beyond, let's say, 10,000 people. I made the number up, but it's just like a certain number, it starts breaking down, and like a more political craft needs to happen.
I agree. And I know you're going to answer the next question, but like I want to comment on that. I think my time is humongous, like me and CEOs and founders, generally speaking, the open-minded ones. So that's probably a couple of million. So I don't think I'll run out of that time. And that's why I'm excited about new technologies and this new way of living, right? In which you're not dependent on these people. I think that the world is scaling in the right direction technology wise. Because, yeah, depending on, I don't have people that can cut me short at this point. I have an audience, I have pretty much everything. And I think it's important for people to take these opinions of mine and engage in a constructive debate, right? Because it's not like, hey, I'm right, you're wrong. It's more like, hey, here's my opinion. It's an opportunity for you to grow some brain cells and have a productive neuron producing conversation. And yeah, if people approach it with that mindset, sure. And if they don't, that's perfect for me, right? Because I auto discard them as of people of my audience. And I think that's how businesses of the future will be run. But that could be quite unfortunate, right? If like same thinking people are like in pure funnels and they're separated from one on another, one on Mars, one on whatever planet, because we share the same values and we don't expose ourselves to new ones, that could potentially lead towards knowing about humans.
Yeah, no, listen, I also not sure, like kind of to like parlay to what you said, at which point the markets disappear, because markets have needs, right? And everything, if everything's automated, then you have everything running with agents. Who has needs anymore? If all the needs are satisfied by
Humans,
AI, like the machines themselves don't have needs, they just need the need of
yeah, they need
electricity, right?
power, they need
Yeah, that's it.
to accomplish a task.
Yeah, but in the end, like all they need is just electricity, right? And if that's the only thing that is actually doing any work, right? So then what are the humans left to do? Now I know it's the ultimate end game. Maybe it's the singularity where we're treading to, but what happens then, right? So I don't have an answer. I just sometimes wonder, like, once we isolate ourselves and automate everything, then if robotics can do the agriculture, do the food, cook the food, procure the food, maybe even feed me so I don't have to chew
Yeah,
it.
nanobots.
Why humans going to be relating to other humans at all, and do we have a society anymore?
Yes, 100%. We would have like new goals, right? Concepts that you and I can't even think of right now. We'd have
Yeah.
like new emotions, new colors, new everything. I don't think it ever stops, but and yet like a nihilist would answer to that, that like everything's gonna come to an end, right? We're gonna go back to the pure dark and unconsciousness
No,
or
it's
whatever
not, it's
that
not
is.
dark. I think it's more,
Yeah, or
it's not,
peace.
it's yeah, it's, I feel like a little bit more empty. We might, and I hear that we might evolve, but I just feel that the arena of enrollment shrinks and shrinks and shrinks ever more, the more AI gets better at what it does, right? At expression, at communication, and so on. I personally don't think we're going to start experiencing new emotions. I feel like humanity has been around for a while to experience all the emotions this box can do. Now, if we augment it and add more neurons, perhaps, but I'm not sure if we're going to have new ones. But you going back to the question which you asked me as far as like exercises, like exploring of what you might be interested in doing. I like these two questions that I generally ask some of my clients who are like thinking like, what exactly do I want to pursue? What kind of ideas I want to pursue? Like, what should I change my life for? And a question that I ask is like, let's say 5 minutes before you die, right? What are the memories that you haven't made yet are flashing in front of your mind, right? And it's a very deep question, and not a lot of people have answers to that. But if you think through that thoroughly, you realize that you kind of are, if you're trying to figure out and optimize your work or your thread of work, you're optimizing for some sort of end goal. You haven't written it down yet. Like you haven't written down like it's for fame, money, whatever. But I think it's for memories, because beyond certain level of time, and I know medicine is great, we're going to stop working, right? We're going to be in the body that that cannot do physical labor anymore, cannot do a lot of thoughts. And the thing which you left, if you hopefully left with, is memories. So you kind of are optimizing your life journey for the memories you're going to have. And what are those memories that you want to make? Because at that point, you're probably not going to be able to make too many new memories. And then for every individual, it's different. And it's also it's also very internal.
Right.
So
the test is pretty good. Just that. And my answer to that would be like sharing the love, right? I think that is a similar answer for most of people that had lots of experience in life, like giving it back, right? Creating it and sharing it in our hearts. But I think this test, first, I think we're going to live forever pretty soon. And second, for me, like if I think of that, it's the reason why I started this podcast. Oddly enough, labor of love, like sharing value for free for people to start their business, scale their business, right? Like continue doing business even when it's bad, having the mindset tools and so forth. I'm not sure if it's working so far. Maybe I should calculate that, but usually that isn't enough to keep me going, right? Keep the lights on. So do you agree that there needs to be like a profit perspective to it? Do you subscribe by the Ikigai equation?
So I definitely subscribe for Ikigai. Don't remember if Ikigai speaks about profit. I know that it speaks about work.
Cash. And just cash. Getting paid for what you're good at, right?
Right. So in the sense that I think it's good to find work where you're satisfied by not asking to get more money. Like for example, another question that I ask is like referring to Archimedes, who said like, hey, if I have a lever long enough and you give me a pivot point, I have the infinite power. If you have the infinite power of making the change in this world and nobody's paying you for that, do you really care? If you are feeling good about it and you know the impact is happening and you're not hungry, now I know you need to satisfy some of your basic needs. If you're not hungry, if you're entertained, if you have the good tribe, if you're good friends, is it important for you to be famous for the other people who you don't care about?
Right. Yeah, I love the leverage equation, and fame most of the time is pretty toxic. At least that's what I convinced myself a decade ago. Where can people find out more about you, Vlad?
Yes, thank you for asking that. So I have a website, humaninterfaces.co. And also, I have a special link for your audience. It's humaninterfaces.co/podcast, where people can jump on a free discovery session where we can talk about what their needs and how they think about the world and what are their opportunities for us to work together and how I can help.
That was another Founder Wisdom